Hi, I'm Karla Jones, Senior Director of Federalism, Homeland Security, and International Relations here at ALEC, and I'm joined by Brooklyn Roberts, Senior Director of Health and Human Services at ALEC.
Hi, Karla. I'm so excited we're doing this today.
Thank you, Brooklyn, and thank you for joining me today. And we have two very special people here today in honor of Women's History Month to discuss the impact of America's fentanyl overdose epidemic on America's families. First, Deena Loudon. She's the mother of Matthew Loudon and an ambassador at an organization called Shatterproof that is dedicated to transforming our healthcare system and society to prevent and treat addiction with science and compassion. Deena Loudon is joined by her sister, Paula Butler, who is also Matthew Loudon's godmother. Welcome, Deena and Paula.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
No, thank you so much for joining us today. I mean, on this really important topic that affects so many families across the country. So, Deena, first, would you mind telling me a little bit about your son, Matthew? What kind of a kid was he? What kind of a brother was he to his sister? What activities did he like? Basically, help our viewers understand who Matthew was.
I sure can. It's never too much to ask me to share Matthew with the world, but Matthew was a precocious kid. He was constantly asking questions of me, just a sponge, always looking for that knowledge. But Matthew was a great kid. He grew up with many friends, and in kindergarten, believe it or not, found his passion for ice hockey. And when he was on the rink, I think that was the place that he could be where the angst didn't constantly make him be inside of his head. So he played all the way from first grade all the way up to an adult league. And he just, he loved it. But he loved hanging out with his friends and, just sort of doing your typical teenage thing, kid thing. But I think above all, Matthew would be described as a really great friend and a really great brother. He always put the needs of his friends before he put him, the needs of himself. So always wanting to take in the stray person that was having an issue and try to make things better for them. So I would just say he was an all around great kid.
The fentanyl crisis is so bad, and we've all heard, stories on the news and about how many lives that we're losing right now. I know, according to recent CDC and White House figures, I think we lost over 100,000 lives to the fentanyl crisis last year. So can you tell us a little bit about what happened with Matthew, Deena?
Yes. Basically in 11th grade, Matthew started using Xanax, and he became quickly addicted. Over that time, he had been in and out of a few rehab centers. He did inpatient, he did outpatient, and he did intensive outpatient. But over the last, I would say, few months of his life, he started tinkering around with some other things, other substances. And on November 3rd of 2020, he had gone out sometime early on that night and was in search of some Perk 30s and took them, and there was no Perk 30 in it. It was complete fentanyl. So Matthew died the morning of November 3rd. And it's left a huge hole in our hearts, in all of our family and all of our friends' hearts.
I'm so sorry that you've been through that. I know a lot of times we forget about the other victims in this crisis, the family members, and it's not just parents, it's extended family, it's friends. So, Paula, can you tell us a little bit about the impact that it's had on you?
Sure. I'd say overall, if I just wanted to make a general description, I think it was almost like a bomb went off in our family. I think after we all heard, we all kind of just fell to pieces. I mean, Matthew was so much of our world for so many different reasons. And, Matthew had a really special way of making everyone in the family feel like they were so important in so many different aspects of his life. So, it was really, really hard to wrap your brain around the fact that he was gone. I'm going to say for probably the first 6 months, I just kind of told myself he was at college or he was at rehab or he was somewhere else. And I just couldn't accept that. But I used to listen to music as an oasis, and pretty much almost as soon as he passed away, I couldn't listen to music anymore. I stopped singing in the car. I'd kind of been in like a little bit of a fog for 2 years. My husband used to talk to Matthew about it all the time. He had a brother who had also passed away from overdose. And so he would talk to Matthew about it all the time. And he still grapples all the time with guilt. Save Matthew somehow. I think it was he couldn't save his brother, and then he couldn't save Matthew. No matter how many talks he had with him, Matthew knew better, unfortunately. And then I think probably the biggest loss, Matthew and my mom had the most special relationship. I think she loved him more than my sister and I, more than any of us. And she had Parkinson's, and when he passed away, I think she really lost her will to live, and her Parkinson's really started to advance. And we actually lost her in August of 2022. So, kind of just had a really whirlwind effect on our whole family.
We forget how destructive the death of just one person can be for an entire family. And while this is something that's affecting American families, one of the things about fentanyl is it's an epidemic that has totally transnational roots. I mean, the fentanyl is being manufactured largely in China. It's being smuggled mainly across our southern border illegally. But Deena and Paula, are there steps that society, that local law enforcement can take to prevent people like Matthew from dying needlessly? I mean, this just seems like such a tragic, unavoidable death. And what would you like to see policymakers doing?
Well, I definitely think that social media plays a big role in this epidemic. But I have been saying over and over and over again, as parents, not only do we need to educate ourselves on this, but we have got to educate our children. We have got to empower them with the information to make good choices for themselves and not to experiment with this stuff, because at such a young age, they pretty much think they're invincible, and they forget that as parents we were once their age. So I've just been trying to get that message out as much as I can, whenever I can, to whoever will listen. And as far as law enforcement goes, they're in a tough position, because I think with the tools that they're given, they're pretty much doing everything that they can do, on a local level. But on a national level, as far as policies, I think that our administration needs to step up and not only make fentanyl a weapon of mass destruction, because it's destroying our population, one by one, but they need to make stronger sentencing, and they need to make sentences so that it's not just a slap on the wrist, and it's going to deter the people who are knowingly selling this stuff to just stop doing it. It sounds silly, but I feel like that's where we really need to be moving towards with this epidemic.
Yeah, I'll tag on to that a little bit. As far as the social media, we have to find some type of policy to rein these in and to really get these companies to give out information. They say it's proprietary, and then they're not going to provide it for any of these, investigations. And I think that needs to change. And Matthew, I believe they told us originally that he had gotten whatever pills he had gotten from the dark web, but they found his last Snapchat, and it was someone local who he was going to get the perk 30s from. And, so we know, and Snapchat's one of the worst offenders out there. Those messages, quote unquote, disappear. So these kids love to use that app, and, just finding a way to rein that in is really important. And I think that our policymakers have a huge role in that, both local, state, and federal. And I know that just recently, the CPB just launched a new effort to try and stop fentanyl smuggling just back on March 13th. So maybe, just maybe, with all of the spotlight on what's going on with fentanyl being smuggled over our border, maybe it's finally getting through. And I also know Senator Kennedy from Louisiana just introduced a bill to reduce the threshold of possession from 40 grams down to 2 grams and increase the sentencing for that. So, hopefully, some of the things that we've been preaching about policy and how they can help stop this epidemic and this war on our kids, maybe it's finally getting through.
Mm-hmm. Well, social media is certainly one huge difference from what drug use was when we were kids. The other difference is fentanyl, using it once can kill you. I can't think of many recreational drugs where that was true, certainly when I was a young person. And now that's the case, that one misstep can end up in a child's death. And Brooklyn, I was wondering, have you seen promising policies across the states?
Yes, most of the state action has focused on enhanced education. As you said, this is a kind of playing Russian roulette, because one mistake can kill you, and so making sure that people are aware of what it is and what it can do. You've seen several states enhance penalties. I know Florida recently is the most recent one to do that, and have stiffer penalties, as Deena was talking about, for offenders. You've seen states expand access to overdose medicines like naloxone or Narcan, having those available over the counter and in places like schools and other facilities has been very helpful in preventing overdoses. And finally, you've got some states that are looking at legalizing fentanyl test strips. Those currently in most states are considered drug paraphernalia and are not legal, but Arizona, Tennessee, and Ohio have recently legalized those. And those, I think that's kind of an interesting idea, and where we're going from a harm reduction process.
Well, I mentioned in my intro that Deena is an ambassador for an organization, a great organization called Shatterproof. I think we've got a really good video from Shatterproof.
What behaviors put someone at risk for fentanyl exposure? Since you can't taste, smell, or see fentanyl, obtaining medication from anywhere other than a legitimate source like a doctor or pharmacy automatically puts people at increased risk of exposure. For young people, counterfeit pills are especially attractive because they're easy to find, cheap, and more socially acceptable than other drugs, and they don't have a telltale smell like alcohol or marijuana. Dangerous behaviors that can lead to fentanyl exposure or overdose include taking pills from friends, getting pills sold from a drug dealer, or obtaining pills through websites that don't require a prescription. Fentanyl-laced drugs often look identical to prescription pills. Can you tell the difference? Adderall. OxyContin. Xanax. A person can easily access drugs that may be laced with fentanyl from their phone or computer through social media. It starts with sellers who post advertising on social media platforms like Instagram or Facebook using suggestive emojis to attract potential customers. After a connection is made, the seller and buyer move to apps like Snapchat, Signal, or WickerMe, where messages either delete after sending or are encrypted to hide the purchase. Within minutes, payment is sent and drugs are shipped. This is very simple for a young person to do. While fentanyl-laced drugs are easy to access and nearly indistinguishable from real ones, there are ways to protect yourself and those you care about. Learn more in the next videos.
Deena, Paula, is there anything else that you would really like for our audience to know about Matthew or about the fentanyl crisis in general?
Well, I don't know necessarily pertaining to Matthew um, but I did want to share something really positive with you. I have been going around to some of the schools in Montgomery County trying to educate the students. It's really about the Speak Up, Save a Life initiative. So I'm traveling with the state's attorney, myself, and someone who's in long term recovery. And I think that really what it covers is it tells them and empowers them to make the right choice if somebody is overdosing, that they need to call 911, how important it is to save somebody else's life. And then, I come in and I speak to them and I explain to them and make them feel the impacts of what losing a child is. And then Jessica, who is in long term recovery, comes in and shares with them. She kind of relates to them and saying, these years are really hard and it's hard to fit in. And how many of you have mental health issues? And, that's what led me down the road that I chose. But I also chose to get healthy. And now she's 8 years clean. So what I wanted to share with you about that is that on Wednesday of this week, we had been to the school the Friday before, and Wednesday of this week, there was an overdose, and the friends actually called 911 as a direct result of what they had learned in these assemblies. And it was so heartfelt, and it made me feel so good that the work that we're doing to try to give these children the tools to make the right choices is actually working, and knowing, that as a direct impact of what we told them, that they saved somebody's life. So the child is okay. I don't know any details further than that, but at least, they took what we said to heart and realized that it would be better to save a life than to go on and not do anything and find out that that person had died because they didn't make the call. So we're just trying to empower them.
Yeah. I'll just say, I know there's an initiative out there, One Pill Can Kill. And I don't know, I don't care how much you think you can tell the difference. They did a whole thing with a DEA secret lab, and they were showing how the DEA agents can't even tell the difference between these pills and the fake pills. So, just don't take anything. And fentanyl is in everything. We all had the luxury, I think, when we were kids, being able to experiment with, marijuana or whatever it was. But fentanyl's in marijuana now, and it's in everything that you get. And so you're playing Russian roulette with your life if you're doing that. So, it's just better not to do it at this point. And, there's a lot of things that can lead you down a path of addiction. It could be an injury from sports, and you get addicted to the pain pills, and then they take them away and you go look for street drugs. But it's just not worth your life. Figure out some other way to deal with this and find support and find treatment centers. Going back to Deena and Shatterproof, I work with them as well in a much lesser extent, but they have something called Atlas, and it actually kind of rates all of the treatment facilities. And so it finds, you can do a quiz and you can find out the best treatment facility for you. And it doesn't matter where it is, they'll figure out a way to get you in. And so reach out, talk to people, whoever it is, whether it's your parent, whether it's your friend, whatever it is. And, I know many times Matthew's friends would come to Deena and they would tell her they were worried about him. And, that was the best thing that they could have done, because, it doesn't matter if your friend gets mad at you for telling on you. I'd rather have my friend alive than and mad at me than dead and, feeling the guilt that I didn't say anything. So, as friends, making sure if you're worried about a friend, speak up and tell somebody, and make sure, whether it's a school counselor, a coach, anybody, just make sure you speak up.
The Good Samaritan laws are really important, and it's important to educate kids about them, because they can make the call to the police. They can call 911 and get help without getting in trouble under those. And so education about that is really important. And I know Karla and I both, I think, have done work on counterfeit drugs here at ALEC, and that situation is very dangerous. As you mentioned, you can't tell the difference. So I think it's important, that we're educating people about that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I remember when we met with the detective that was working on Matthew's case, he said that he had just recently been in court, and they literally had to call in experts to be able to try and tell the difference between the fake pills and the authentic pills that are produced in, in the pharmacy labs.
Right. Well, I want to thank you two so much for taking the time to tell us about Matthew and to share your story. And I also want to thank you for the leadership that you're showing in making it so that Matthew didn't pass away in vain. It's like you're saving other children using the knowledge.
Definitely have made that my mission. Like I said, on a normal basis, I don't think I'll ever know. But with this incident that happened last week, finding out that our work helped and they listened, it's just overwhelming to know that child is going to be okay.
I suspect that the two of you have saved a lot more people than you realize. And I think getting Americans to pay attention is, if they understand the human impact, if they understand how this epidemic is affecting families everywhere, I think that might be the key to solving it, for the nation to have the resolve to solve it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And one more quick thing, I know when Matthew passed away, I would tell people fentanyl poisoning, and they had no clue what fentanyl was. So just by talking about it and advocating about it and getting the word out there, and getting people to understand what it is, I think that awareness has helped greatly in so many different ways.
Well, thank you, ladies, for being here and sharing your story with us today. And thank you to our viewers, too. We will see you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks.